Now we continue with our State of the Nation address build-up. Now in this segment, we turn our focus specifically to youth employment. Now as of Q3 of 2025, the official unemployment rate for those aged 15 to 34 reached 43.7%. Now that translates to roughly 4.8 million unemployed youth. Now ahead of the State of the Nation address, the youth is calling for youth unemployment, dignity and economic inclusion to be placed firmly at the center of national priorities. Joining us to discuss this further is Ravi Naidoo, Chief Executive Officer at Youth Employment Services, also known as YES. Good afternoon, Ravi. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. Now, a bit earlier on in our program, one of my colleagues spoke to a master's degree holder who's been looking for work since 2020 until she decided to start her own kota sandwich business. I mean, this is good on her to get up and do something, but unemployment in our country is at crisis point and needs government to do a bit more because her story is the story of many. What are you hoping to hear at tonight's State of the Nation address that would make you say, yes, now this could yield positive results for a large number of citizens?
So there's two things that we can build on as a country, which are positive. So first, mostly jobs will come from economic growth. And I think on that regard, economic growth was 0.6% in 2024. It's up to 1.5% now. And you really want it to be at 3 and 4%. So what can be done to push that further? But it's going in the right direction, just too slowly. The second thing, which is positive, that should be built on, is business and government have been working in much better partnerships, as you saw, in terms of infrastructure. The country has been making progress on energy and on rail. And now we need to turn those collective efforts towards youth employment and see what we can do to push that up. So the announcements you really want to hear are, what is the president and government going to do to make it easier for companies to hire young people and just build on those programs? And what can the government itself do through public programs to get young people perhaps into opportunities, to help us fix things like infrastructure and social care and so on. So long-term issues, as well as what can be announced now that shows, yes, there is much more attention and collective resources being mobilized for youth employment.
Now, if I had to place into categories what you've said, you spoke about economic growth, you also spoke about greater investment in infrastructure, those two specifically being more long-term goals. If we look at the massive infrastructure build program, where we heard last year of the 1 trillion that was going to be ring-fenced to do just this. And then you also speak about incentivizing the private sector to absorb more of the youth. Now, that is probably the one that is more short-term. So when you speak of incentivizing the private sector, it's also not a novel concept. We've heard it before in various State of the Nation addresses where the president has said they will look into that. So what now would be perhaps a different message that somehow leads to the private sector eventually absorbing? What would the private sector want to hear?
Yeah. So obviously the long-term activities must start now, even though they will have an impact later. And the short-term ones should also kick off now because we can't wait for the long term. So if I take the private sector and youth employment in particular, we would love to see, as the YES program and all the rest of those initiatives looking at youth into private sector jobs, just let companies use the skills development levies they're already spending, which is a lot. They're paying towards them. Can they claim them every time they hire interns? Because we want people, young people, to get their prior job experience. So there's lots of red tape that stop companies using the 25 billion rand they already put towards skills development. So we would love to see that happen. We would love to see also, I think, if you look at, there's an employment tax incentive. So every time you hire a person under 29, you can claim some of that back as a company gets your tax. That threshold hasn't changed very much in 10 years. So it means hundreds of thousands of young people no longer fit within that incentive. And, if they could just increase it to something keeping up with inflation, which would mean from 7,000 to 12,000, another 400,000 people would be covered. I think we, again, as a country, spend a lot of money on TVETs and post-school education. Those things need to link much more closely to companies which would really need technical people into their businesses. But we don't have good relationship between these post-school education programs and companies. So I think a lot of it is not new money. It's just let's put the pieces we have, which taxpayers spend a lot of money on, or in Yes's case, it's not taxpayer funded, but companies pay. Let's put it together so that we really are getting value for all of these programs.
That aspect is quite interesting when you speak about companies perhaps having greater communication with some of these TVET colleges, because I was listening to the NYDA and they were saying we need to go the route of a skills revolution where we're reskilling the youth for the relevant sectors of our economy. So who then initiates this greater communication? Because the private sector could be sitting out there thinking we have no relationship with academia to that extent. So who draws them closer to say, come in, be part of almost refining this curriculum so that these individuals are then ready for the work environment?
Yes. So the good news is we are spending so much money, and our problem is really a massive coordination problem. So, you spend 12 years in school, probably not the best years of your life, and at the end, are you employable? Has the school helped you become employable?
Yeah.
Do we have more companies working with schools to give young people a taste of what is to come? So that's a huge thing, to get the schools to be more focused on getting young people work ready. Then we are spending a lot in TVETs, and what you want is people to go into trades. Not enough people go into trades. They go to TVETs for non-trade training, but we need people who can fix infrastructure. So again, we're spending the money, and there should be, the boards of TVETs, and we should have a much more active process between business and government to get the TVETs linked. There is some work happening, but we need it faster. And then if you're doing TVET work and you can't get a job, well, then you should join a YES program. And the YES program will actually have you placed in a company for another 12 months. So now you've got your TVET experience plus your YES experience, or from university. So you're giving young people 12, 24, 36 months of actual work experience, by which time, A, they are more trained, and B, they know more people in companies, or they're establishing their own companies like that person you mentioned. So you want to give everyone and the young people an extended taste of training to employment. And I think that's the skills revolution we're talking about. Let's just make sure once you pass 15 years of age, you have at least 3 to 5 years of training, but in close contact with companies. And that makes you much more work ready.
Ravi, I actually wish you could speak a bit more on the YES program, because it's quite impactful. I actually saw one article on MasterCard having just welcomed the latest cohort of the YES program, some of your members there. But unfortunately, we have run out of time. But thank you very much for your insights this afternoon. That's Ravi Naidoo. He's Chief Executive at the Youth Employment Service, also known as YES.